A relatively undiscovered real mountain railroad handles heavy tonnage in the heart of the South. Extending west from Chattanooga's Wauhatchie Yard, the 145-mile-long CSX main line to Nashville hosts over a dozen freight trains every day through a region steeped in Civil War and railroad history. We are right outside Chattanooga as a Norfolk Southern coal and merchandise train highballs under the bridge carrying CSX out of the Tennessee city. Near here, the two railroads, which normally have an intense rivalry, merge their tracks for the first 33 miles as a joint operation as far as Stevenson, Alabama. The Chattanooga subdivision of CSX is a natural extension of the railroad's Western and Atlantic line from Atlanta, shown in our previous CSX video. From Chattanooga, the track runs south into northern Alabama to avoid rugged mountains. It then turns north, back into Tennessee to pierce Cumberland Mountain with a tunnel, and continues on to Nashville. Whiteside is one of the first small villages west of Chattanooga on CSX. A northbound train is bound for Nashville. Nearby is a spectacular trestle, high over Interstate 24. A southbound train of container cars gives motorists an eyeful and earful of railroad action as it heads for Chattanooga. A northbound consist of mixed freight soon takes to the air, headed across the high bridge to the other side of the narrow valley and to the shore of Nickajack Lake. We wonder what was here before the steel and concrete trestle, which was modified with huge concrete pillars when the interstate highway was built. We are now on the north side of the same trestle. A northbound work train carrying welded rail crosses the valley. The early morning mist muffles the sound slightly. CSX skirts the south shore of Nickajack Lake on the Tennessee River, where the track and a state highway run along the top of a dam and a dike. A pair of road locomotives and a switcher waste no time with the northbound train. We are in Alabama, where a large lift bridge at Bridgeport Bar carries CSX across the shipping channel on the Tennessee River. The lift span is in a very remote location, where any attempt to reach it with less than a four-wheel drive vehicle is discouraged. We are on the opposite mountainside, several miles away, as a work train crosses the river. We are now on the east bank of the Tennessee River, opposite Bridgeport, Alabama, as a 3-unit northbound CSX freight, with a General Motors diesel sandwiched between two General Electric locomotives, proceeds slowly onto the lift bridge. The Tennessee River, extending into central Alabama, sees extensive barge traffic. The center lift portion of the CSX bridge remains down most of the time, until the bridge operator sees approaching river traffic. Once they are clear of the bridge, these locomotives cross a narrow island and then a second fixed bridge to reach the west shore of the river at Bridgeport. There's a little bit of everything in this northbound freight. Bridgeport is on the joint track with the Norfolk Southern. A southbound unit coal train from the west heads to an electric power plant in the southeast. It is powered by locomotives with the contrasting paint schemes of the Norfolk Southern and the Union Pacific. Double track temporarily ends here to run on the single iron over the Tennessee River. This is the second bridge across the Tennessee River, the fixed span, complete with a full track bed of ballast on its deck. This bridge is built to last. Another mix and match of locomotive paint schemes is about 2/3 of the way back in the train. The red boxcar-like unit houses the controls and sensors for the mid-train power. Do thoroughbred black and white and armor yellow go together? Well, they do on the bottom line of the ledgers of both railroads. A northbound CSX freight comes off the bridge at South Bridgeport and snakes around the tight reverse curve leading past the old passenger station at Bridgeport. Those extra long and high automobile cars behind the GM and GE locomotives exaggerate the tightness of the S-curve at Bridgeport. Bridgeport has an attractive Spanish mission-style station, reminiscent of the Southwest and of southern Florida. We are just west of Widows Creek, Alabama, as a fast-moving northbound CSX ballast train heads for the mountain. The 5 locomotives and their train of bright orange cars duck under the newly constructed twin bridges, which will carry Route 2 over the railroad. Stevenson, Alabama, is where CSX and Norfolk Southern go their separate ways. CSX to Nashville and NS to Huntsville. The imposing brick depot, right where the two lines diverge, was built in 1872. It is now a museum owned by the city. The Union Pacific Railroad is calling at Stevenson today with another of those interline run-through trains from the west. No sooner has the Norfolk Southern piggyback and container train left Stevenson than a southbound CSX freight comes down the hill at a decidedly energetic pace. It passes the north side of the historic station. The Stevenson Railroad Depot Museum shares both the city's Civil War and railroading past with visitors. The Union forces at Stevenson were commanded by General James A. Garfield, later President Garfield. The railroad heritage was the Nashville and Chattanooga Railroad, built through Stevenson in the early 1850s. Later, the legendary Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis, the Louisville and Nashville, and the Seaboard system wandered past the station. Finally, today's CSX visits many times each day. Outside, a GE 44-ton diesel locomotive and a caboose are on display. Another Norfolk Southern unit coal train, again with shared Union Pacific locomotives, is about to head for Chattanooga on the jointly shared track. Before that happens, a northbound CSX ballast train heads up the mountain to Sherwood, where some track work is underway. The lead locomotive is a former Baltimore and Ohio unit in royal blue paint with the Capitol Dome emblem on its short hood. Behind it is a slug unit. The CSX ballast train is not even clear of Stevenson before the Norfolk Southern coal train gets a high green to be on its way. There is always hot railroad action in and around Stevenson. A brace of mid-train power, now a virtual trademark of any long Norfolk Southern freight train, also has combined NS and UP power. Another southbound CSX freight, headed up by a brand new General Electric locomotive, escorts a train of mixed freight through Stevenson. We have moved on up the mountain, where a CSX work train is dumping and spreading rock ballast at Sherwood, Tennessee. Here are the slug and the B&O locomotive we saw earlier. Cowan, Tennessee, 63 track miles from Chattanooga, is the heart and west end of the Cowan Pusher District over and through Cumberland Mountain. The steel plaque from the tunnel is in a city park, while the 2,228-foot-long tunnel, 4 miles south of Cowan, hosts numerous trains every day. A northbound freight exits the north portal of the tunnel and immediately ducks under a picturesque stone arch bridge, which carried the Tracy City branch. It was abandoned in 1985. Locomotives on both tracks were posed here for photographs during both the steam and diesel eras. Here are the pushers, an assignment usually held down by SD-40s and SD-50s. They're heading south to pick up a northbound train at Sherwood. A northbound freight glides nearly noiselessly down the 2% grade around a curve out of a rock cut about 2 miles south of Cowan. Standard practice is for the pushers, based at Cowan, to couple to the rear of a train in either direction and push it up and over the crest of the grade. The crest is located inside the Cumberland Mountain Tunnel. The train then pauses while balanced on this crest, with its locomotives out one side of the tunnel and its rear cars out the other side. The pushers are then uncoupled so the train can continue on its way unassisted. This is a short stretch of rugged mountain railroading at its best. Within a few minutes, the downgrade pushers follow the northbound train they just assisted. The pushers sound and look impatient as they return to Cowan. Could another train be waiting to go over the mountain? Sure enough, a southbound CSX freight train of grain cars is patiently waiting in the yard as the pushers return from helping the northbound. There will be no break for the pusher crew between these two runs. Within a few more minutes, the pushers have coupled up. The modern GE power on the head end and the GM pushers at the rear dig in for the steady climb to the Cumberland Mountain Tunnel. Not all freights need assistance over Cumberland Mountain. A number of them, particularly the ones with empty cars, can tackle the 2 miles of 2% southbound grade or the 4.5 miles of 2.5% northbound grade. The grade stiffens noticeably, even before the track is completely out of Cowan. The roar of the climbing diesels, fore and aft, is already reverberating off the sides of the deep cuts. About an hour later, the horn of another northbound CSX locomotive is heard in Cowan as a container train descends the grade. At one time, much of this park was occupied by railroad tracks. Cowan is still a railroad community, but the physical presence of the railroad has diminished considerably. Cowan remembered its railroad heritage by buying its railroad station, moving it across the tracks, and setting up the Cowan Railroad Museum in and around the historic frame building built in 1904. Much of the museum is devoted to commemorating the men and equipment of the Pusher District. We settle in for a ride up and over Cumberland Mountain with the Pusher crew during a portion of their workday. The starting point is the compact pusher terminal on the north side of Cowan. The locomotives head out to meet a northbound rail train and assist it over the mountain. Once the pushers are clear of Cowan, the climb starts right away. The abandoned Tracy City branch diverged to the right near here and swung a wide loop as it climbed up and over the main line. That was only the start of the rugged branch line, built with 3% grades and 17-degree curves. No wonder the regular riders affectionately called the line the Mountain Goat. We're on the twisting and turning 2% climb, heading up to the tunnel. The fill gives way to a deep cut. Suddenly, we round the curve, duck under the Tracy City Branch Bridge, and plunge into the cool, moist tunnel. The Cumberland Mountain Tunnel was holed through in February 1851 by crews of slaves and Irish immigrants. The Nashville and Chattanooga had anticipated this would be the most difficult part of the railroad, and work started in 1849 on the tunnel first. 3 vertical shafts were blasted down from the top of the mountain, and work on the tunnel proper proceeded from both ends and in both directions from these shafts. The tunnel has been enlarged several times since its opening nearly a century and a half ago, as cars and locomotives have become progressively larger. To the right can be seen the remaining rails of the escape track at the south end of the Rockledge siding. The tracks once diverted runaway trains into a pasture before they could go hurtling out of control down the mountainside. Shades of the better-known diversion tracks on the Southern's Saluda grade in North Carolina. The most rugged, steepest, and curviest portion of the CSX line over the Cumberland Mountain, with the deepest cuts, is on the south side of the mountain. There are 4 miles of single track between Rockledge and Tantalon. The runaways, which came roaring down this grade in the days of steam power, are still legends in south central Tennessee. If they could talk, what tales these rock cliffs could tell of nearly 15 decades of trains slowly grinding their way up this grade or carefully descending the mountain. There were trains which got out of control as their frightened crews hurriedly looked for a place to jump off. Sometimes a soft spot on the ground was not available. This is rugged country north of Sherwood, with lots of kudzu and trees, and an occasional animal to notice the passing trains. It is virtually inaccessible by any means other than train. The signal gives us a caution indication as we slow for the start of the double track at Tantalon. The double track continues for nearly 2 miles to Sherwood. Our pushers are pullers on this run. A train of continuously welded rail needs to be helped over Cumberland Mountain. This is touchy cargo. It extends without interruption from one end of the train to the other. Since there is no slack action between the cars, it is considered safer to assist the regular locomotives in pulling the train up the grade. The locomotives of the rail train have eased up to the rear coupler of the pushers, now pullers, as we start back over the mountain from Sherwood. With the locomotives climbing instead of drifting, the noise is considerably louder. With diesel-electric traction, the trains proceed along much more readily than they did behind steam power. We are back on the single track between Tantalon and Rockledge, grinding upgrade toward the tunnel, through the whole series of deep rock cuts, and around one curve after another. After a steady climb, we come to the south switch at Rockledge, with the remnant of the escape track for runaway trains now on our left. Within a few more minutes, the south portal of the tunnel comes into view. During the Civil War, the tunnel was often an objective of the opposing armies. Although a Federal supply train was blown up at the north portal in October 1863, the bore came through the war relatively undamaged. Once the train is clear of the north portal, it is downhill all the way to Cowan. The space to the left carried the track of the Tracy City branch as it started its even steeper climb up out of Cowan to reach Swanee, Monteagle, Tracy City, and Colmont, one rugged stretch of mountain branch line. We soon roll back into Cowan, with the Cowan Railroad Museum and its short train on the left. The pushers have dropped into the siding, out of sight to the right, and the welded rail train gets underway as it continues north. It still has a long trip ahead of it to reach Nashville. We now have a random selection of CSX train action west of Cowan. We first catch a southbound train of auto cars and mixed freight snaking around a reverse curve to the crossing at Courtner. War Trace was the site of a Civil War battle. A much more common occurrence these days is the passage of a southbound CSX freight, with a Southern Pacific locomotive as the last unit in this power lash-up. We follow this train all the way back to Cowan. Deckard is more than a tank town, even for the railroad. At one time, the now abandoned Huntsville branch left the main line here to head south into Alabama. The train of auto and mixed freight cars with the Southern Pacific locomotive is continuing south. The cab of the small Porter 242 steam locomotive at the Cowan Railroad Museum provides our vantage point as the visitor from the Southern Pacific helps its train along. The pushers are now on the rear as the train makes a run for the start of the 2% grade just south of Cowan. A short time later, we peer over the top of the tank on the tender of the steam locomotive. A northbound CSX automobile train with no shortage of head-end power comes down the mountain. Not surprisingly, pusher service was not necessary for this train. The old station at Deckard, 6 miles west of Cowan, appears a little worse for the wear. Although the Huntsville branch has been abandoned, several miles of the line which once originated here are being restored just north of Huntsville by the North Alabama Railroad Museum. North of Deckard, a CSX work train heads north. The locomotive has its long hood forward. This is the last train of the day until 5:20, and it's only 9:30 in the morning. CSX is shutting down the Chattanooga subdivision to do track work. The railroad is back in business. A northbound hotshot freight crosses an estuary of Timms Ford Lake at Estelle Springs, Tennessee. We're about 5 miles north of Deckard. The fishermen barely notice the trio of growling locomotives and the train. No, we are not in the middle of the track south of Tullahoma. The camera magic of a zoom lens makes for some dramatic effects. We try not to make them too dramatic, as a pair of General Electric locomotives wastes no time getting a northbound freight of mostly grain cars over the Chattanooga subdivision. We are at the same location as a southbound 4-unit grain train rolls along at a good clip. The train is probably transporting Midwestern grain for loading aboard ships at Savannah. It still has a long rail journey ahead of it. South County Farm Road at Murfreesboro is the setting for this northbound freight. A single 6-axle General Electric locomotive has a train of automobile cars in tow. We are just south of Nashville as a trio of light engines heads north. Radnor Yard is the heart of CSX operations in the Nashville area. A sweeping aerial perspective taken from the hump tower gives an idea of just how large the place is. We get another elevated view from the other tower at Radnor Yard. The whine of diesel locomotive turbochargers literally drowns out all other sounds. No wonder it's such a noisy place. On the other side of the tower, several locomotives are doing their part to put together a couple of trains. More switching is underway in this part of the yard. Number 8000, one of many General Motors SD40s on CSX, is earning its keep, not quietly, as it switches cars at Radnor Yard. We are back at the hump tower, looking down the long lead track leading to the classification tracks. The hump pusher locomotive has just released its last cut of cars, and now has to head over to the receiving yard for more freight cars in need of classification. CSX has phased out many of its yard switchers in favor of larger locomotives. On the ground, the uncoupling of freight cars has changed little over the decades. Computer printouts have replaced the old switch lists, but a switchman or woman on the ground still lifts the coupling pin to uncouple the cars as they crest the top of the hump. Let's watch the smooth operation for a few moments. We have taken you over 145 miles of bustling CSX track from Chattanooga to Nashville. It has been another throbbing mainline adventure. The Chattanooga subdivision never sleeps. And this is not the end, only a pause in our journey. Join us when we continue on from Nashville to Louisville soon. All aboard!
We hope that you have enjoyed this video. Take a look at our awesome website at www.greenfrog.com. There you'll find extensive descriptions of all of our products and our complete catalog, which you can download. You can also order all of our products online with our secure online order system. In addition, you'll find color pictures of our tape covers, sample audio sounds from our CD and audio cassette library, moving video of portions of our videotapes, magazine and historical society reviews of our video and audio products, and links to many other railroad-related sites.